For centuries, Canada has been seen as a land of peace, prosperity, and quiet resilience. But beneath this image lies a past filled with secrets, betrayals, and battles that could have changed the course of history forever. Did you know that Canada came close, multiple times, to being absorbed by the United States? Or that powerful nations once fought over this land in secret negotiations and shadow wars? The history of Canada is far more than what is taught in schools. From hidden treaties to forgotten wars. From resistance movements to world-changing innovations. Canada's past is full of untold stories waiting to be uncovered. What if I told you that the Canada you know today almost never existed? That history could have taken a very different turn if not for a series of hidden decisions, secret deals, and unexpected moments of defiance. From the battles they tried to erase, to the inventions they tried to bury, to the war that nearly wiped Canada off the map. This is Canada's secret past, the history you were never told. Long before Canada was a country, before Europeans ever set foot on this land, powerful Indigenous nations thrived here. But their history is often overshadowed by the story of colonization. What if I told you that some of the most advanced democratic systems and trade networks in North America existed right here, long before European influence? These nations had sophisticated governance systems, with the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, an alliance of 5, and later 6 nations, governing through a system of democracy so advanced that it's believed to have influenced the U.S. Constitution. Meanwhile, the Cree, Blackfoot, and Metis peoples mastered survival in the harsh landscapes of the prairies. At the same time, the Haida and Salish built intricate trade routes along the Pacific coast. Despite the arrival of European settlers and the subsequent chain of events that would reshape their world forever, the indigenous nations remained resilient, adapting to the changes and continuing to contribute to the fabric of Canadian society. Most people believe Christopher Columbus was the first European to reach the Americas. But the truth is, nearly 500 years before him, the Vikings had already landed in Canada. And for a brief moment in history, they tried to settle here. In the early 1000s, Norse explorer Leif Erikson led an expedition from Greenland to what the Vikings called Vinland, a mysterious land believed to be modern-day Canada. They built houses, forged weapons, and even engaged in trade with indigenous groups, but their presence here was short-lived. According to Norse sagas, the local indigenous inhabitants, whom they called the Skraelings, resisted their presence, leading to violent clashes. Facing fierce opposition, the Vikings abandoned Vinland and vanished from Canadian history. But did they truly disappear? Some theories suggest that small groups of Vikings may have integrated with indigenous communities, leaving behind hidden traces in oral traditions and genetic markers. The mystery of Canada's first European visitors remains unsolved today, but it's clear that the Vikings did not simply vanish from Canadian history as some accounts suggest. After the Vikings left, Europe largely forgot about Canada for centuries. Until new explorers arrived, driven by myths of lost cities and untold riches. This obsession with the unknown would fuel the next chapter of Canada's history. Some believed Canada held a legendary city of gold, while others thought it was the key to a secret passage to Asia. In 1534, French explorer Jacques Cartier sailed up the St. Lawrence River, claiming the land for France and encountering powerful indigenous nations along the way. He didn't realize this would begin centuries of struggle between European powers to control Canada. Canada was no longer just an untouched land. It had become a battleground for empires. A land of hidden conflicts and secret deals that would shape its future in ways no one could have predicted. By the 1600s, Canada was no longer an unclaimed land. It was a chessboard for two of the world's greatest empires. France and Britain both saw Canada as the key to controlling the wealth of North America. And for over a century, they fought for its dominance. The French, led by explorers like Samuel de Champlain, established vast trading networks with indigenous nations, relying on them for survival and commerce. The British, on the other hand, sought to expand their colonies from the south, clashing with both indigenous groups and the French in a battle for supremacy. This tension erupted into full-scale war in the 1750s. The battle for Canada peaked in 1759 when British forces, led by General James Wolfe, launched a surprise attack on Quebec. The battle on the Plains of Abraham lasted only 15 minutes but changed history forever. Both commanders died in battle, but the British emerged victorious. The fall of Quebec marked the beginning of the end of French rule in North America. In 1763, the Treaty of Paris officially handed Canada over to Britain. But this was far from the end of Canada's struggles. It was just the beginning. A few decades later, the newly formed United States set its sights on Canada. Many American leaders believed it was only a matter of time before Canada would join them, either by choice or by force. In 1812, the United States invaded Canada. They believed British rule was weak and Canadians, especially recent American settlers, would welcome them with open arms. They were wrong. The invasion was met with fierce resistance. British soldiers, Canadian militiamen, and indigenous warriors, especially those led by the legendary Shawnee leader Tecumseh, pushed back the Americans. In one of the most shocking twists in Canadian history, British and indigenous forces even burned down the White House in 1814. After 2 years of brutal fighting, the war ended in a stalemate. But one thing was clear. Canada had survived the biggest threat to its existence. The US would never attempt a full-scale invasion again. But their desire to control Canada never truly faded. But many people don't realize that Canada played a hidden role in one of America's greatest conflicts, the Civil War. In the 1800s, Canada became a haven for thousands of escaped slaves fleeing the horrors of the American South. The Underground Railroad led them to freedom in cities like Toronto and Halifax. But Canada's role in the Civil War didn't end there. While some Americans saw Canada as a refuge, others saw it as an opportunity for war. Confederate spies secretly operated out of Canadian cities, using them as safe bases to plan attacks on the Union. In one infamous case, a group of Confederate agents launched a surprise raid on St. Albans, Vermont, from Canada. The attack shocked Americans and nearly dragged Canada into the war. But Britain, still in control of Canada then, quickly shut down Confederate operations, preventing the conflict from escalating further. Canada had once again walked a fine line between survival and war. But the greatest battle for Canada's existence wasn't on a battlefield. It was happening in secret meeting rooms and backdoor negotiations. And the deals that were made would change the country forever. Most people believe Canada became a country through peaceful negotiations. But what if I told you that its existence resulted from secret deals, heated conflicts, and last-minute betrayals? By the mid-1800s, Britain was tired of defending its North American colonies. Meanwhile, the United States expanded aggressively, fresh off their Civil War victory. Many feared that if Canada didn't unite, it would eventually be absorbed by its powerful southern neighbor. And so, in 1864, secret meetings were held among leaders of the British colonies. The idea? To form a united Canada. But there was a problem. Many provinces didn't want to join. Provinces like Prince Edward Island and Newfoundland refused to join at first. They feared losing control over their economies. Quebec worried about its French identity being swallowed up by English rule. Even Nova Scotia's leaders hesitated. To make the deal happen, politicians made backroom promises, offering financial incentives, railway connections, and political favors. After intense negotiations, the Dominion of Canada was officially created on July 1, 1867. But this wasn't a complete victory. Some provinces, like Newfoundland, wouldn't join until decades later. But what many don't realize is that this grand unification came at a hidden cost, especially for the Indigenous peoples who had lived on these lands for thousands of years. As Canada expanded westward, the government struck deals with Indigenous nations, treaties that were supposed to guarantee land rights and resources. But many of these agreements were signed behind closed doors under pressure, deception, or outright fraud. In some cases, Indigenous leaders were misled about what they were signing. Others were promised food and aid, only to be abandoned once settlers arrived. This led to starvation, displacement, and violent resistance. One of the biggest betrayals came with the Métis people, who fought to defend their land from government expansion. They launched an armed resistance led by Louis Riel. But despite their efforts, Canada's government labeled them rebels. Riel himself was executed in 1885, in what many consider one of the darkest moments in Canada's treatment of its Indigenous peoples. The effects of these broken promises still impact Indigenous communities today. Land disputes, resource battles, and demands for justice continue to shape Canada's future. As Canada expanded, there was still one looming danger: the United States. Many feared that the Americans would try again to take Canada by force. So, behind closed doors, Canadian leaders hatched a plan. They needed a powerful railway to link the country from coast to coast. The idea was simple: if the country were connected, it would be harder for the US to invade. But there was one problem. Building a railway of this scale would cost millions. And Canada didn't have the money. So, in the late 1800s, the Canadian government turned to wealthy investors, many of whom profited from insider deals. The result? The Canadian Pacific Railway was completed in 1885. It was a stunning achievement, but it came at a cost: scandals, corruption, and thousands of exploited workers, many of whom were Chinese laborers who faced brutal conditions and discrimination. By the time the railway was finished, Canada had secured its borders and solidified itself as an independent force. But beneath this achievement lay a web of hidden sacrifices and untold struggles. From backroom negotiations to broken treaties, the creation of Canada was far more complex than the history books suggest. Deals were made, lives were changed, and entire nations were reshaped in ways few truly understand. But Canada's influence didn't stop at its borders. In the next part of our story, we uncover Canada's hidden role in shaping world events, from espionage to technological breakthroughs that the world wasn't ready for. Canada is often seen as a peaceful nation known for diplomacy and neutrality. But what if I told you that behind the scenes, Canada played a key role in global espionage, secret intelligence, and even nuclear warfare? During World War II, Canada became a center for covert operations. Allied spies were trained on Canadian soil, and the country secretly helped develop one of the deadliest weapons in history, the atomic bomb. Few people know this, but Canada provided much of the uranium used in the Manhattan Project, the secret US program that built the atomic bomb. Nuclear history might have unfolded very differently without Canada's hidden contributions. And Canada wasn't just working with the Allies, it was also a target. In 1945, a shocking revelation emerged. Soviet spies were secretly operating in Canada, stealing classified intelligence. The infamous Guzenko affair exposed a massive Soviet espionage ring, marking the beginning of the Cold War. Canada wasn't just a passive observer in world affairs, it was at the center of some of the most critical moments in history. And the secrecy didn't stop there. Few people realize how advanced Canada was in aviation and military technology. Canada once designed a fighter jet that was so powerful that it could have changed air combat forever. So why was it mysteriously shut down? In the 1950s, Canadian engineers created the Avro Arrow, a fighter jet so advanced that it was considered a decade ahead. It could fly faster, higher, and more efficiently than any other aircraft worldwide. But just as production was about to take off, the Canadian government suddenly canceled the entire project. Not only that, but every prototype and blueprint was ordered to be destroyed. Why? Some believe pressure from the United States played a role. The Avro Arrow was seen as a threat to US military dominance. Others speculate that Cold War politics forced Canada to rely on American defense systems instead. To this day, the true reason behind the cancellation remains one of Canada's greatest mysteries. Canada has also been home to some of the greatest scientific minds in history, yet many of them have been forgotten. One of them was Dr. John Polanyi, whose work helped develop the field of quantum chemistry. His discoveries paved the way for lasers, fiber optics, and modern computing. Yet while other scientists gained global recognition, Polanyi's contributions were often overshadowed. His research changed how we communicate, innovate, and explore space. But how many people today know his name? While Canada is often seen as a peaceful nation, its role in global conflicts and intelligence has been far more complex than most realize. From the Korean War to modern-day peacekeeping missions, Canada has been deeply involved in global security. But not all of its operations have been in the open. Over the years, Canadian intelligence agencies have worked behind the scenes in counter-terrorism, cyber warfare, and espionage. Yet much of this remains classified, hidden from public view. As technology advances, Canada plays a silent but crucial role in the world's intelligence network. But how much do we know about the operations that shape our modern world? From secret wars to lost innovations, from global espionage to technological breakthroughs, Canada's past is far more mysterious and influential than history books suggest. And even today, as new global challenges arise, Canada remains a quiet force, shaping history behind the scenes. The question is, what other secrets are still hidden in its past? Which of these hidden stories surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more forgotten history.